Welcome back to the station. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. In today's episode, we are going to do an update on the stimulus package in the United States. We're going to take a look at what has happened to date under the CARES Act. We're also going to look at the new HEROES Act that was passed by the House and sent over to the Senate this week, and we're going to look at what that particular package contains. And even though the HEROES Act probably will not be passed into law, it's important to understand its components to give us a glimpse into the future as to what a potential additional stimulus package in June might contain. We're going to talk about all those things and more in today's episode. Do me a favor, if you learned something today, hit that like button. If you want to know more, subscribe. If you got something to say, as always, comment below. And if you have the time and you like the channel, share me on social media. So the first thing we're going to do is summarize the CARES Act. Now, CARES is short for the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. That's the acronym. And that is the stimulus package that has already provided 3 rounds of relief to the U.S. economy and U.S. citizens. After we do that, we're going to take a look at the HEROES Act. Now, that is the Health Economic Recovery Omnibus Emergency Solutions Act. I think these guys think of the acronyms and they go back later and try to put words to match them because they're a little bit complicated, don't always make a lot of sense. As you may or may not know, the CARES Act was sponsored by the Republicans and it was signed into law. The HEROES Act is the Democratic response, and it was to be on top of and in addition to the CARES Act. We're going to talk about the contents of each one today. Now, first off, let's summarize what has already happened under the CARES Act. Now, after the various rounds of stimulus, the CARES Act has pushed about $3 trillion into the U.S. economy. If you recall, the CARES Act contained about 7 major components. The first of which was the big business loans. These were loans for businesses that had more than 500 employees, and this contained the bailout of the airline industry. A second component was the small business loans, and these were for businesses that had less than 500 employees, and this is the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, where loans were given to small businesses, and if they spend that money on approved payroll costs, those loans actually turn into grants and are basically free money for these small businesses. If you recall, the initial wave wiped out all of the money that was set aside for the PPP program. However, in a second round of funding, they put another over $300 billion into the PPP program, and there is still money available in this program if you're a small business out there and you have not taken advantage. You may also recall that the CARES Act expanded unemployment. It increased the amount of people that were eligible for unemployment. It expanded the number of weeks from 26 to 39 weeks. And the federal government provided a supplement for people on unemployment to receive an additional $600 per week on top of whatever they were already earning under the state's unemployment system. The first round of the CARES Act had some tax relief measures. It allowed employers to delay payment of payroll taxes. It also waived the 10% penalty on people who withdrew from their retirement accounts early. The fifth area involved injecting money into health care. The original focus was on the PPEs, or the personal protective equipment. The first round of the CARES Act poured a lot of money into getting the necessary equipment for our frontline healthcare workers. Subsequent rounds have put money into research and development, and the latest round pumped a lot of money into mass testing so they could test people for the coronavirus. The original CARES Act also had large block grants to the states, several $1 billion to the states that they could use at their will to combat problems that each state has incurred relative to combating the coronavirus. There was also hazard pay that has been included for frontline workers, healthcare industry workers, and essential workers in various industries. And last but not least was the stimulus checks. That's what everybody was looking forward to. It was $1,200 for people who made $75,000 or less a year. Now, if you made between $75,000 and $100,000, there was a phase out. Above $100,000, you didn't get anything. You could double that if you're a married couple, and everyone that had children that were less than 17 received $500 per child, and that was for people who were eligible for the adult benefit for making less than $100,000 per person per year. Now that combined under the CARES Act was about $3 trillion worth of stimulus money. The HEROES Act has now come along, and this has been introduced by the Democratic Party, and it is asking for an additional $3 trillion to be pumped into the economy as stimulus package money. Now, of interest in the HEROES Act, there is no new money for big business. There's no new money for small business. And there are no expanded tax benefits whatsoever. Instead, the HEROES Act focuses on 4 or 5 areas. One of which would be to give an additional $1 trillion to the states in a block grant format to allow them to use the money as they see fit to combat coronavirus issues. The HEROES Act proposes another $200 billion as additional hazard pay for our essential employees and our healthcare and frontline workers. The HEROES Act would also continue to expand unemployment benefits. It would continue the $600 per week for the end of the year. Under the CARES Act, it extended for 13 weeks, but this would essentially triple the amount of time people could qualify for the additional $600 of unemployment benefits. There is a brand new area under the HEROES Act, and that would be a moratorium on foreclosures and evictions, allowing people to basically not have to pay rent or their mortgage for a year. And there was funding and proposal to try to help mortgage companies and landlords to offset the costs of this year-long forbearance. And finally, there would be another round of stimulus checks. And like the CARES Act, it would be an additional $1,200 for people who make $75,000 a year or less. There again would be a phase out between $75,000 and $100,000 per person on the stimulus checks. Under the HEROES Act, there is an exception, and that's for single individuals who file as a head of household. The limit would go up an additional $12,500 on the income side to allow more people to qualify who are single parents. And probably most significantly under the HEROES Act is that instead of $500 per kid, you would get the same as an adult, $1,200 per child with a 3-child maximum. So that means that a family of 5 would receive the maximum, and that would be a $6,000 stimulus benefit from the government. Now, interestingly, the CARES Act was only eligible for American citizens that had a Social Security number. And usually that means you were born here in the United States or overseas on American soil. The HEROES Act adds in the I-10 crowd, as they're called, the ITIN. That stands for the Individual Tax Identification Number. And this is like a Social Security number, but this is a number that is assigned to essentially immigrants. Now, it's estimated that there are about 7.8 million people that have the ITIN number as opposed to a Social Security number. And yes, some of these immigrants are here illegally, but a lot of those are legal U.S. citizens. They just weren't born here, and so they don't have a Social Security number. One of the sticking points of the HEROES Act is that it would allow for stimulus checks to go to this ITIN crowd. And not only this round of stimulus checks, but it would be retroactive, and it would allow the first round of stimulus checks to also be issued to the nearly 8 million people that have an ITIN number as opposed to a Social Security number. So that is what's in the HEROES Act. And the question is, so where are we in the process of this bill becoming law? Well, Before we dive into that too far, let's briefly review about how a bill becomes a law. Now, as we know, there are two chambers of our Congress. We have the House of Representatives on one side, and then we have the Senate on the other. Now, a bill is usually introduced on one side or the other, and the first thing that happens is the bill is read, then it's sent to committee, and a committee will usually make a recommendation before it's sent back to the full chamber to be debated. If a bill is voted on and passed in one chamber, then it's sent to the other chamber, and essentially the same process happens again. Now, with the HEROES Act, it has been introduced in the House of Representatives, it has passed in the House of Representatives, and it's been sent over to the Senate. Now, the difference in our current government is that the House of Representatives is controlled by the Democratic Party, meaning they have a majority of the representatives. The Senate, however, is controlled by the Republican Party, meaning they have more than half of the senators being from the Republican Party. The general consensus is that although the HEROES Act passed the House, that it is not going to pass in the Senate. In fact, President Trump has said he will veto the HEROES Act, even if it's passed by both the House and the Senate and it goes to his desk. He said he's going to veto that bill. Now, if you know American government, the Congress can override a presidential veto, but it takes 2/3 of Congress to do so. And we saw from the vote on the House of Representatives side that it was very close. Even though it passed, there is no way the House is going to get 2/3 majority, and we know the Senate is not even going to be anywhere close. So the likelihood of the HEROES Act becoming law is probably less than 1%. But that doesn't mean that there aren't important aspects of the HEROES Act, because it basically summarizes the significant talking points of the Democratic Party. Now, even though the Republicans have said, you know, we've already approved $3 trillion worth of stimulus money, the economy is opening back up, let's see where we're at in 30 days or so before we jump right in and do another $3 trillion. Now, the Democrats say we need the money now, and obviously who's right and who's wrong, well, that's subjective and a matter of opinion. But even the Republicans have said that it is very likely that we're going to have another round of stimulus money in the future, probably mid-June. And there are some areas of common ground between the parties that we should examine, because those are the probable areas of the next round of stimulus money that's probably coming in the next 30 to 45 days. What we've seen is that both parties agree there's probably additional stimulus checks that need to be sent out. Now, under the CARES Act and under the HEROES Act, they both agreed on $1,200 per adult. So another round of $1,200 per adult seems likely in the future. Now, when it comes to children, the CARES Act was $500 per child, and the HEROES Act was $1,200 per child. So most likely there'll be some sort of a compromise there. So I would expect more than $500, but less than $1,200 per child, and it will probably be capped at 2 or 3 children. Both parties seem to agree that our frontline workers are essential employees and our healthcare workers need hazard pay. So I would anticipate that the next round of stimulus money will include hazard pay for these workers. Both parties seem to agree that states have been negatively impacted, so a substantial amount of money will probably be approved for additional block grants to states to use as they see fit to combat issues with the coronavirus. And finally, both parties really see a significant need to increase testing in the community. So I assume a lot of additional money will be brought forth in the area of additional testing. What is not clear and what we don't have any consensus on is whether there'll be any additional loans or benefits for businesses, whether there'll be any additional tax relief issues, the housing forbearance on the payment of mortgages and loans. Who knows what's going to happen on that front? And last but not least, there doesn't seem to be a clear consensus on expanding additional unemployment benefits. So those are areas to stay tuned in, and we'll see what the Congress winds up doing with the next round of stimulus money. So that's the skinny. Now, there is a lot of clickbait out there. People are saying, oh, you're going to get $6,000. You're going to get this money. You're going to get that money under the HEROES Act. And it's clickbait. What you need to do is pay attention. Just because it passed one house doesn't mean it's law. It has to pass the other house and then be signed into law by the president. So don't fall prey to clickbait. Always check back with this channel. We'll give you the real information, up to date, and as soon as we can get it out to you. So thank you for watching. If you learned something, hit that like button. If you got a comment about what I said in this video, put it down below. If you want to learn more about these types of issues or other legal issues, subscribe to the channel. And as always, I always love it when you share me on social media. Thank you for watching. I'm Joshua Roberts, and this is Lawyer Up.
Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this.